Welcome to Berlin, Germany, and week 7 of the LEC Spring Split. With only 6 games left for each team, the playoff race is now well underway. You can see Origen taking it to the building. They will be facing off against Splyce, with Vedius returning to the top lane from his absence last weekend. Looking forward to that matchup, and hello everybody, I'm Trevor Quickshot Henry, joined here at the analyst desk by Andrew Vedius today, and our special guest for the week, Maurice Amazing Stuckenschneider.
Oh, he didn't even say my nickname.
It's good to have you back, my Schnooky Stucky. We've missed you, buddy.
I've missed the condescending tone that you often brought, and the way in which you'd look down upon me as the superior analyst, which unfortunately you could never earn that title, could you, Maurice? Could you?
No, Maurice, I'll earn it for the day, I think.
We shall see.
We actually do have predictions coming up later. I want to see whether or not you guys are different in any way. And of course, talking about the league here in week 7, G2 Esports are still looking solid in first place. They've clinched that playoff spot already, but behind them, absolutely everything is wide open. From here on out, every game counts, and the hashtag is back.
Yeah, it is.
Alongside hashtag LEC. And just a few quick updates. Origen, they went 0-2 last week. Vedius, last week Fnatic and Misfits went 2-0.
Yep.
And of course now this week, Vitality had that substitute mid laner.
Yeah, there were a lot of surprises last week, and there were many question marks around how teams would perform. The one I'm keeping my eyes on is what Schalke will look like coming into this week, because last week they had a very difficult week. We saw some poor performances from Memento especially, and hopefully they can bounce back coming into week 7.
I mean, it's a difficult one for Schalke. They started so strong, amazing. What's your perspective on the team? You know, there was... Up until week 5, week 6, people were saying that they might be the second best team in Europe, and now that is not as defendable.
I think some meta shifts kind of led to the fact that they now have to relearn the game. They coasted to a certain extent off of the experience that Dylan obviously had through Worlds, so he could basically lead the team in terms of pick bans and give them some kind of experience advantage, and now they actually have to learn alongside the other teams and prepare for playoffs in the end.
All right, prepare for playoffs. Luckily for Schalke, they do have a step in the right direction. And before the final 3 weeks of the split, our stats team actually ran the numbers to figure out each team's chances of making it into playoffs. I want to show you the key results. Now, when you look at this table, you have to take into account that this is 50-50 odds. It does not take into account the strength of schedule or remaining games and the team's current form. What you're looking at is the number of scenarios in which a team is locked into playoffs, all right?
And immediately the first number you're going to see is that Fnatic 26% number. I'm sure many fans are getting a little bit worried right now, but it is because they are 1 game down compared to everyone else, and their first half of the split definitely did not look very good.
No, it really, really didn't. We will get to Fnatic towards the end of the segment. As you can see, SK was sitting with minus 60%. That is a graphical error. What it means is 60% of the remaining scenarios will get SK into playoffs, and I want to talk about them. This is a team that is sitting in the middle of the pack. Their strength of schedule includes Origen, Misfits as well. And for me, this was a surprise team. Amazing. What was your take on SK Gaming, how they came into the league, and where the current standings are?
I honestly didn't expect much from them. When I looked at the players, I kind of felt like obviously they had the Lions experience coming in, and obviously they were coached beforehand. But then transitioning to the LEC stage is a completely different concept. But they all fit in well. Selfmade does his job really well, and Pyrion, honestly, who I thought was maybe even like a wrong signing, really comes into his own too and fits well into EU.
I would argue that they have a fairly challenging strength of schedule, or like schedule coming up ahead. They should be able to get wins against SK and Rogue. The most important game for them will be that one against Origen, given that they are one of their direct competitors. And I think it's realistic to expect that it'll be a very close game against Splyce, but G2 and Vitality, I feel, will be the toughest games for them if they want to try and get some surprising wins anyway.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the team as well. They've had another coaching change. Realistic is coming in to replace Broken Shard. These are a bunch of players that hit the ground running. You know, there was some former experience, but some rookies to this stage. Amazing. What's your take on, you know, can they surpass expectations? Can they steal a playoff spot from the likes of an Origen or a Misfit if they carry on winning?
I mean, I predicted they wouldn't like a couple weeks back on PGL, but I think the way that they have actually evolved and continue to evolve, I think it's entirely possible, especially if Misfits go back to the old form instead of the surging run that they have recently.
I definitely feel that they've surpassed many expectations. I was definitely one of those people that put them at C tier very beginning of the split, and even though they didn't start off strong, I felt like they've shown a surprisingly high ceiling. And I think that with more growth and a good infrastructure, this team can develop into a top contender in Europe.
High ceiling, more growth. One of the enemies for SK you talked about was Origen. A couple of of similarities there. Does Origen have a lower floor? I mean, look, this is a team that has to bounce back. They went 0-2 in week 6. They took down G2 in week 5. Stucky, how the hell do I explain Origen?
I don't know either. They actually perform completely opposite to what I expected them to perform, because when you look at the players, when you look at Myth, when you look at Nuke Duck, and when you look at the coach staff, you kind of expect them to have a high floor and a lower ceiling compared to, let's say, the likes of G2. But they can be G2, and they can probably even lose to Exet, so they actually do the opposite of what I expect them to.
And of course, when we just explain that the concept of ceiling and floor, it's just like the basic level of play. The basic strength is what we refer to as the floor. The ceiling is them playing at their absolute max, their absolute best. Vedius, when we look at the strength of schedule, we talk about Origen. I mean, what's your read on this team?
Well, I think that we're going to talk a lot more about it later because they are playing our first game of the day. Yes. But for me, I think this team is struggling to figure out how they want to play just yet. And I love the fact that Maurice brought up this meta point, because I do think that it's something that understanding what champions are strong, how to adapt on each patch, and how they come into the week is a big part of whether or not this team finds success. So I look forward to exploring it more, but right now I still think they're one of the favorites to make it into
I mean, when you look at the strength of schedule at the bottom of the screen, they've got XL, they've got Rogue. There are a couple challenging games around them.
SK, again, will be one of the most important games.
SK Origen, that match could determine seeding going into the brackets. Now, of course, one of the things we talked about a lot is head-to-heads. A team that has a very strong head-to-head right now is Misfits. They've got a tough road ahead of them because their strength of schedule does not include both 9th and 10th place teams.
Yeah, it's really fascinating because when we looked at the percentages earlier, fans may have noticed that they were actually 3rd after both Schalke and Splyce. And the reason for that is because what you mentioned, the head-to-head records that they have over many of the other teams is very good. But now they have one of the hardest strength of schedules because they have to go against all of the teams that are surrounding them, and they have Vitality and G2 still left up for grabs. So it is going to be a very difficult road for Misfits moving over the next few weeks.
Fortunately for them, head-to-heads are in their favor. So if they get tied in the standings, having that tiebreaker in their favor is a good thing. And of course, they're playing against a weakened Vitality with that sub in the mid lane. Moose returned to the stage. We'll see what Hussein can do for the team. And Vedius, you talked about the percentage chances for Fnatic a moment ago. Let's turn our attention to them. Fnatic are on the cusp of another miracle run. What's your take? Can they do it?
Well, I think that it's within their power because what I've seen is a refinement on a strategy that they went back towards over the last 2 weeks. In week 5, we saw them invest very heavily into the bot lane. The introduction of the AD carry changes, I think, definitely suited them. But last week, we saw refinement of it because we saw Hylissang on playmakers. We saw Broxah on an early game jungler that stuck to a plan that was properly executed upon. And I think right now they have all the tools to challenge a lot of the other teams surrounding them.
They have the tools. You're busy looking at the tools now. And while you're watching this clip, and you're about to hear from Amazing as well, I want the fans at home to jump into chat and let me know, will Fnatic make playoffs? Hit yes or no. Spam your answer in chat. Amazing. Tell me what you think about Fnatic and then answer the question, will they make playoffs?
Okay, I think they will not make playoffs, but I do think that they actually are now playing the style that I wanted them to play without caps, because with caps you obviously had to you could be able to always go to mid lane, you always make plays around them, but now with a rookie mid laner you kind of have to go back into what worked beforehand, and then Reckless is the man to go to.
And what about strength of schedule? We'll get that on the screen in a second. They've also got Rogue and XL.
I believe there's
5 wins, right?
Yep.
So
yes.
if you assume they beat Rogue and XL, gets them to 7, 9 is sort of the magic number that will at least get you a tiebreaker in most cases.
Yes.
Where do they find 2 more wins?
So I think Rogue and XL, as you mentioned, good wins for them. I think you can make the argument that G2, they're going to lose. And before coming into this week, you may have said that Schalke would be a difficult win, but based on their recent performance, that's realistic. But I think the 2 big ones are Misfits and Splyce. And if they can take those teams down, then their likelihood of making playoffs is almost guaranteed.
Do you agree with that? Do you think they can do it?
I mean, I don't agree with the Schalke part, but I agree with the rest. I think it is entirely possible. I still think it will not happen, but they match up really well against Splyce. They match up well against Misfits. Like, Reckless, when it comes down to it, as I already said, he's someone that can rely on. He will always make the right play in the right moment. So against 2 late-game teams that rely on the AD carry, he will do well.
And the reason that Vedius and I are both reacting and listening is fans are only 59% in favor of Fnatic making playoffs. I've seen Fnatic losing fan votes this split. I've seen a not particularly confident.
It makes me wonder if just the Fnatic haters are in full force, or
Also,
if the Fnatic faithful are starting to lose that faith.
Are the Fnatic fans growing up as well? Find out! Let us know!
Wow.
LEC Spring Playoffs, they're just around the corner. Let's quickly remind everybody of how the teams can earn themselves a spot in Rotterdam.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the LEC. Now we've made a few changes to our format, and it's pretty straightforward. So without further ado, let's take a look. During the regular season, our 10 teams will compete against each other in a double round robin best-of-1 format over 9 weeks. Now it's time for the playoffs. Each match will be played in a best-of-5. To start off, in round 1, teams ranked 3 to 6 will face off, but with a catch. Team number 3 will have a choice of playing team number 5 or team number 6. For this video's sake, let's say they choose team number 5, which means that team number 4 will play against team number 6. In round 2, not only do we get the winners from the previous week fighting it out, but also get to see 2 juggernauts in team number 1 taking on team number 2. Now it's on to round 3, with the winner of the juggernauts moving directly into the finals. On Saturday, April 13th, the loser of match 4 will play the winner of match 3. And on Sunday, we've got the cream of the crop playing against one another for a winner-take-all. We hope you like the new playoffs format. Thanks for watching.
I'm a really big fan of the new playoff format, and of course, if you finish first or second in the regular season, you are guaranteed to go to Rotterdam. Amazing. What's your take on the new system?
I like it, especially for the top tier teams, because it now kind of guarantees you to get some points if you're amongst the top 2, because getting to Worlds is everything you want in a year anyway. And if you're top 2 now in the regular season, you're basically among the top 3 for the playoffs too.
And I know some fans may be concerned, like, hey, if a team gets 2 opportunities, but the team that won only actually gets 1 save, the reality is, speaking to some of these top teams, they're like, only having a 1-day turnaround after losing to then have to beat a team, to then have to prep for a new team, is apparently equivalent to already being a game down.
Basically, if you're in the finals, you get all of those additional hours to prep and watch your opponents. And of course, we'll see who makes it there. Before we get to Rotterdam, before we get to playoffs, it is time to look at today's schedule. Let's take a look at the matches here in week 7. Now, Fnatic versus Schalke is our match of the day. You're not allowed to get excited about that yet. Okay, so what I do want to know is, Amazing, what matchup are you looking at first?
I'll take Origen against Splyce simply because I have so many old friends and old teammates on those teams. I may have predicted Origen to win, so sorry, Touchy, but
is there a reason outside of just friendships?
I mean, it's also an exciting matchup because I do think that their styles kind of collide to a certain extent. You have like a late game AD carry in Corby, you have an early game kind of AD carry in Patrick. So we'll have to see what Origen brings out because they've also shown like inadaptability to the patches.
Well, hold that thought for a second, because you said predictions. That is actually our next one. There is a lot at stake in the race for superior analyst, something that Vedius has never won, where the fans are leading the pack with 40 points. This is a huge shout out to all the fans at home. You guys are voting more than ever before. You are ahead of all of my analysts.
Yeah, you're a North American analyst for today's section.
Of course, because you've only joined us for this weekend, Amazing, I'm taking a look. No differences from myself, so good taste there. But Vedius, why
so you're both wrong. That's
why are you going to be wrong with match of the day? Fnatic are going to lose.
So, the reason why I had faith in Fnatic, and there was a long internal monologue with myself last night, but ultimately what it came down to is I don't trust Abadage. I think that his performances over the last few weeks have been extremely underwhelming, and I think he's going to be a huge point of weakness, especially as Nemesis is stepping up. So that, for me, is going to be the deciding factor in why Fnatic win.
Okay, do you agree with that sentiment? Anything to contest?
I mean, if you don't trust Abba, then you should not trust Nemesis either, you know? Like, I think Abba has actually performed a little bit better than Nemesis throughout the split, so I think if he gets the champion...
Did you know that he died 14 times only last weekend?
I mean, you know, like, some people make their careers out of dying isolated, you know? Like, there's still someone that is, like, French and plays for Misfits, you know?
All right, well, look, that's going to be match of the day. I'm looking forward to that a little bit later. It's the 2 leading horses in the race for playoffs. It will be Fnatic taking on Schalke for our match of the day. Fnatic got dead in the water as G2 Esports have repeatedly killed them. The fastest win of spring, G2 destroy Fnatic.
My father always says, you either win or you learn.
There'll be a little bit of pressure. Whoa, Memento! That is not the time to push that button.
What the hell just happened? Memento!
I think by every loss we have learned something really crucial.
Probably has been one of the toughest Fnatic splits ever. It has been horrible as a player as well, being in this situation and being on the brink of not even making playoffs.
It just left me kind of scared, I guess, going into the split, because Fnatic is supposed to be the kings of Europe, right? We're not supposed to be some lower tier team or 8th place team.
I do feel confident in my team. Right now it feels terribly, So I don't want to stay in this emotion. I obviously want to come back and show that we are still a strong team.
There's the Ottawamne ultimate. It's clean from the cannon, and it is an absolute bloodbath. The fountain will barely keep Nemesis safe.
Fnatic looked really disjointed and they weren't really on the same page in the beginning of the split. I don't really think Reckless is like ahead of me in any aspect right now. I for sure don't think Reckless will be a problem versus me.
Jack will step forward, both ways up. Reckless steps forward, go! This is his moment, and he shines right when the team needs it most.
I've seen everything. I've been through everything. I know what to do in the dire moments, and I don't think he has the same sort of knowledge that I do.
I don't really want to beat him when he was on the ground. I want to beat him when he's at his peak.
Oh, they're so well played! The sync up on the abilities, Reckless is gonna die!
At this point, honestly, all the wins matter. Since we're on the upswing and they're a little bit on the downswing, maybe this is the perfect time for us to take them down. I know that when it matters the most, people can trust me to get the job done.
Triple for Reckless, the quadra, the pentakill for Reckless.
At this point, any game means everything to us. We are not allowed to drop games at this point.
If we want to win this whole thing, we just need to take it as serious as possible, like if it's the last game we're ever playing together.
A rematch of the finals from last split, and it is not under the same expectations that it was back then. Schalke slumping, the fact that the pressure's on Fnatic. They have never missed playoffs, and if they do not start picking up these wins, it means that they might not make it for the first time ever. So that video did such a beautiful job of setting the stakes and reigniting how exciting and important this matchup is today.
I don't think I've seen or heard Broxah be that depressed in any kind of interview, you know? So that was pretty
Listen,
moving.
And he said it. He didn't get to the hashtag, every game counts, right? You can use that now because for them it's super important, but amazing. You know, when we were talking about this matchup, you were looking at Upset versus Reckless. We heard both of them speaking in the video. I mean, who's going to be the clutch player today?
I mean, Reckless said that he has been through everything, but I think Upset at this point in time is probably the most reliable AD carry when you want someone to win the late game for you. So I actually think he has replaced Reckless as like this steady force that can win you games every time it counts.
Well, very extremely important matchup. Stakes standings, of course, Schalke are making a bid for second, with Vitality losing their substitution or having that substitution, and Fnatic in a difficult position. Outside of the AD carries, which other players do we need to watch?
Ooh, well, I've got my eyes on the junglers. It has to be. Memento had one of his worst performances last week, and we know that he's going to be beating himself up about it. He's going to want to look to show a good performance against Broxah, who definitely seems to be on the upswing, especially with his early game impact. So those are two crucial players for me.
All right, so junglers and AD carries, we'll keep a look at that. Take a look at that a little later today. Of course, the teams will be playing on patch 9.4 this week. And for a little more on the changes, let's hear from Ender and Frosk.
Thank you, Quickshot. In this breakdown, we'll look at some of the key changes in patch 9.4 and how they are going to be affecting pro play. And while we might see a lot of champions being hit on this patch, I think we can both agree that overall, it's going to be a low impact in the overall meta.
Yeah, and that's the idea. It's low impact in the overall meta. So we don't expect team playstyles to change or even a lot of these big key picks, but the ecosystem will dramatically change because signature picks like the Urgot were really tapped.
Yeah, I mean, Urgot, you look at it, mana cost increased, shield lowered. This character got absolutely slammed. And for a champion that sort of defined the top lane meta, you can see 100% presence inside of the pick and bans. This is going to completely overhaul the top lane landscape, it would seem.
And that's what we mean when we say the word ecosystem. When Urgot is no longer just the safe, blind pickable priority pick, then suddenly champions like the Kennen and the Jace, who are kind of the counter champions, start to rise up a little bit in priority, or in Kennen's case, almost fall down a little bit, and the champion pool should start to open up. If you work with that in tandem with Conqueror changes, then suddenly champions like Riven that we saw earlier in the LCK, Jax and Fiora can also start to open up his niche. So I think across the board, we should see more versatility in top lane.
Yeah, versatility, some exciting skill matchups in that lane as well. But if we actually go back in time and look at what was priority picked on patch 9.3, you can see that the Urgot was taken out, the Karthus was nerfed, the Lucian, the Yasuo as well, all received some hits, which really is going to sort of impact this sort of metagame, because while we see these two champions removed, 9.4, and if we switch over to that, is going to unveil some new picks that replace those two at the top.
Yeah, and it's the idea that with Karthus and Urgot getting the nerfs, that suddenly Galio and Jace start to rise up in priority. And this is a fun game. Figure out what the top 5 or 7 champions are that teams want, and you can start to quickly figure out what the priority pick on blue side is going to be by how these trade these bans back and forth.
Yeah, and while you saw some nerfs to those 3 on the bottom, I still think Yasuo's flexibility within the draft and the laning power of Lucian is still strong enough to warrant early picks in the draft.
And 2 champions champions that barely just scraped out of this image were actually the likes of Jarvan when you speak about flexibility, his ability to play in both the jungle and the top lane, as well as a big signature support pick in the Braum in his relationship to Ezreal and Lucian.
Yeah, of course, Braum has very good synergy with those champs to quickly stack up the passive and make for a very solid all-around support to pair into basically any 2v2 lane. But it's not just a new patch that's hitting the Rift tonight. From now on, you'll be able to relive the greatest moments of the LEC from more angles than ever before, thanks to our new tool, League Director.
League Director, it is a tool to make League of Legends highlights that you guys can use at home. For a little bit more information, check out the news section in your League of Legends client and be on the lookout today and all weekend long for some epic scenes tonight. Our observers are going to have some fun with it. Let's turn our attention to our first matchup of the day as Splyce look to take a giant leap towards playoffs with a win against Origen. Just before we dive into the game, amazing patch 9.4. Is it huge changes? Should we check mostly the same? What's your overall thoughts?
My overall thoughts is that something like Rek'Sai will make a comeback. We'll actually see her a lot more. And I think teams will actually replace Urgot with Jace on the top lane. So you actually have like a slightly different meta, which is maybe even a bit more lane-centric than beforehand.
And I'm really curious as to how that influences Splyce as well, because one of the big champions I'm looking at on 9.4 is Rek'Sai. We've been having a lot of conversations around it in the office and online, and I feel like that when you look at the early game impact that Xerxes as a player has had,
yes,
perhaps Rek'Sai is the champion for him, because this man creates every early game opportunity and creates pretty much all of the advantages that Splyce could even find.
I mean, he does. Splyce are a team that are on 7 wins. They're looking to challenge for second place if they can. You've already touched on Xerxes a little bit, but let's actually dive into the numbers just a little more. Some of the stats and some of the early game impact, because Vedius, I think you've used the words that if Xerxes doesn't play well, this team doesn't win.
Yeah, Splyce isn't a team without the success of Xerxes, and you just only have to look at some of his stats, in particular, first blood participation sitting at first above Jankos, and on top of that, his goal difference at 15. He's building his own leads in the jungle just because of how active he is on the map and how influential he is in the early game.
Hold the brakes now, hold the brakes, because this is great. Excitement, early game, Xerxes, great. Amazing. What the hell goes wrong with this team in the mid-game? Because I lose the confidence.
A lot of things. So what I historically have seen from Splyce is that they are really, really good at 1-4 comms. That means basically AD carry is going to be mid lane at some point, push out the waves, you get mid pass, and then you contest vision around Nashor. But when this play changes to having to push out side waves first, which is the 1-3-1, is when Splyce seems completely lost and they don't know what to do. So I kind of expect them to continue this trend, but they have to fix certain mistakes in this kind of area and basically understand how to play sideways in order to operate in the mid game.
And following on from Amazing's point, when they don't control side lanes, they end up in these drawn-out games. What you're seeing on your screens is these really terrible team fights that they end up finding themselves in because players get caught out of position. They're moving through areas of the map that they don't have vision control over, and ultimately it's just a matter of they lack an understanding of what to do with their early game leads, and they regularly get punished for it.
Well, let's see if they've cleaned up that mid-game today. Obviously, Vizicachi is back in for Arome, so let's see if they'll be operating at full strength. And their opponents today are Origen, who are also reeling off their terrible 0-2 week. We're standing by with Laure and their coach.
Thank you very much, guys, and thank you, Guilhoto, for joining me ahead of your game. You went 0-2 last week. Yes. What happened?
I mean, we had a bad week. I think that probably the G2 win made us slow down a bit, and we obviously paid a really high price on the week after. But at the same time, just as our win was an eye-opener for G2, this week was also an eye-opener for us, so we hope to show a way better performance this week.
Looking up to the schedule you have ahead of you before playoffs, how do you feel?
To be honest, I don't even know what schedule we have ahead. I know that we have Splyce today.
You have 4 playoff contenders. That's
yeah. I mean, when I say I don't know, it's like I don't care. It's more on that way. We will take just one game each time. We know that we can beat every team, and we know that every team, except maybe one of two, can beat us. So we want to take each game one game at each time, and the playoff. Let's say the playoff race will just be on our end. If we do our job and we take one game out of time, then we'll be there.
That's a good way to approach it. Who would you say is the key factor of the game, and how do you increase his power in game?
From our players?
Yeah.
I think that we are at a state where we can play for all three lanes. All three lanes show a carry potential. I would say that the way that the meta is going at the moment, probably having a good matchup mid and taking advantage of the wide champion pool of Nuktak is a key factor for us. But at the same time, if we cannot achieve it, we know that Alphari can carry, we know that Patrick and Mythic can carry, so it's we don't have a particular key, and that is one of the things that I think make us strong contenders.
Good thing, yeah, good elements on every side. Thank you for your insights, and good luck today against Splyce. And back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you very much, Laure. That was a fantastic set of questions for Andre. And of course, Origen, look, they were on the rise. They took down G2. They were soaring to the stratosphere. And then they ran out of fuel and crashed and went 0-2. I heard Andre talking about carrying through all three lanes. Vedius, you have some pretty strong feelings that if one particular player doesn't step up, why is it Mythy? And give me a little bit more in-depth.
So for me, what I've done is kind of looked back over the last few weeks and kind of when they've been winning and when they've been losing. And one of the big things that I noticed for this team is in their losses, a lot of the deficits end up coming from their bot lane. And while I don't really want to throw shade at the bot lane, in particular, I just think it's largely due to Mythy. The reality is he gets caught out way too often, and if he doesn't find success, then Patrick can't succeed. And when you are guiding this young rookie, and when he's not able to have as much of an impact on the map as he does in wins, then it means the Origen struggle, and they can't really carry anywhere else on the map.
I mean, there's a lot of speculation, obviously, but I do think that Mythy, if he's ahead in laning phase, he is able to basically shotgun more freely. He's able to roam around the map. He's able to create plays for Nuktak, who's a control player. He's allowed to help Code to kind of generate a couple of leads, who's also kind of a defensive player, and Alphari too. So when Mythy and the bot lane is ahead, it opens up the map for them, and they actually become a proactive team.
Stylistically, which team has the advantage in this matchup, knowing that Splyce are pretty good in the early game, but maybe struggle in the mid game? Amazing. Who's it going to come down to?
I mean, I think it actually comes down to Nuke. In my head, I do think that, as Andre already said, that the mid lane is really important. And I think that Nuke, as an experienced player, similar to Fabian, for example, is able to take care of his lane in a way that a lot of rookies are not able to. So he's going to generate a bit of a gold lead, maybe a bit of a CS lead, but the pressure he creates through mid lane is unrivaled.
I'm personally quite excited for the bot lane AD carry matchup. I think we saw some very solid performances from Kobe. I mean, as we often always do, but I don't know whether or not this is a lane that they can look to try and attack or play through from both sides. The key difference will be whether or not Xerxes can enable this bot lane, and if they can try and shut Mythy and Patrick down, or whether Origen will be able to control this early game of jungle powerhouse.
Super quick hit. Patch 9.4, knowing 60 seconds on the clock. Does it benefit one team more than the other?
I think right now it benefits Splyce a little bit more just because of the changes in jungle. And I feel like Zeus is so quick to pick up new jungle picks and be very effective on them. Yeah, I just feel that right now, this is a good opportunity for him to flex his champion pool himself.
Okay, I actually think it benefits Origen because the Conqueror change actually could bring in some split pushers for the top lane. I think Alphari has an advantage over Chachi where his champion pool is just a lot more versatile than Chachi's.
I absolutely love it. That was actually unplanned. I didn't know they were going to go opposite. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Let's see which analyst is superior as the race for playoffs.
I voted for Origen.
I mean, me too, actually.
We are ready for tons of action. Gentlemen, contain yourselves. We're taking to the casters.
Thank you very much, Quickshot. Bold from Vedius to predict Splyce here. A lot of OG favoritism coming in today. He didn't, of course, actually pick Splyce. But we're going to find out. Splyce, I think, a team that is often underestimated in these huge battles. Of course, I'm Daniel Dracos. This is Christy Ender Frierson. I almost forgot to introduce you guys. I'm so sorry. This is Indiana Frost
right into the point.
I wanted to yell at Vedius. It's my favorite pastime. We're the All-American rejects. We're taking back Friday today. And it's going to be an interesting cast, to say the least, as we have 3 people to kick off what we think will be a very slow, very controlled macro game.
I mean, we say that, but Splyce have consistently been a very early game focused team.